All right, good morning, everybody. So glad you are here. I believe that God's promised to do so much more than we could ask or imagine, immeasurably more, the Bible says, and I think He's doing that in our lives, in the church's life here, and it's absolutely amazing. I do want to say that the youth group that's meeting here on Sunday mornings has got something specifically designed for middle and high schoolers, so when you're directed there, you can feel free to go there. But kids, we also have an amazing kids ministry, and I'm so thrilled because there's so many people who are gifted and called and just excited to work with your kids. All of those people are background checked, they're fingerprinted, so we have full confidence in them. But I remember going to church as a kid and what they did for kids. They would call it kids ministry, or in that day it was Sunday school for kids. It was the most boring thing. I mean, now I think about it, that I'm still a follower of Jesus and still love church after that experience is, amazing. I give God credit for that, but I think what we offer kids here is absolutely amazing. So make sure you get your kids here on Sunday mornings and get them plugged in, and invite your kids' friends to come as well. That would be so cool. Well, anyways, a brand new month, so I can't believe it that we're already into February. And as they said, the 40 days of prayer and fasting is coming up. We'll hear more about that next week, but that's starting on Wednesday, February 18. So you can sort of get yourself primed and ready for that as to what you are going to fast, what you are going to give up, and what you're going to do during those 40 days. And then the Olympics starts this week, that's pretty exciting. I love the Winter Olympics. Curling is like one of my favorite Olympic sports. I think curling, skeleton, bobsledding. Those are three amazing things. But I was wondering how bobsledding would work if bobsledding and curling kind of work together. So you can just imagine somebody with their broom out there on the track as this bobsled's coming at them at 100 miles an hour. It could be fun. I think they should try to combine a lot of things and see if they can come up with some new sports. Anyways, look, we're going to go for round three of Would You Rather. And so I'm going to ask you 10 different Would You Rather questions. Everybody participates. Nobody's going to hold you to any answer that you give. It's just for fun. For example, would you rather eat unlimited tacos for life or unlimited pizza for life? How many taco people? All right. How many pizza people? Okay. All right. That's cool. Would you rather be able to speak to animals or be able to speak every language fluently? How many of you want to speak to animals? Okay, those are the pet owners. How many of you want to speak every language fluently? Some of you don't care about either, but that's okay. That's okay. Would you rather have a rewind button for your life or have a pause button for your life? Now, I'll let you kind of think on that for a second, because that's not one you can just boom, jump and answer. I mean, you like tacos over pizza or pizza over tacos, so that one was easy. But a rewind button or a pause button? How many want a rewind button? Okay, a pause button? Okay. The rewind button is for the people who keep screwing up all the time. You just want to rewind and try it again. I get it. That's good. That's good. That's good. Would you rather lose your phone for a week or lose your sense of taste for a week? Now, this is a big one. This is a big one. Tells a lot about you. How many of you would rather lose your phone for a week? How many would rather lose your sense of taste? Okay. Yeah. And that's why Apple makes the kind of money that they do. Okay. Let's see. Would you rather eat what you want and never gain weight, or say whatever you want and never face consequences? Eat whatever you want and never gain weight? Okay, bunch of foodies here. How many want to say whatever you want and never face consequences? Okay, all right. She probably said that because she does eat whatever she wants. But anyway, so, all right. Would you rather win the lottery or know you fulfilled God's purpose? Now, I know if you weren't in church, you might answer this a little differently, but just be honest. I'm not going to hold anybody to it, although we do have a camera up there that's filming. So, would you rather win the lottery? See, okay. I'm going to just add another one. Would you rather tell the truth or tell a lie? Okay? All right. I would love for you to fulfill God's purpose. That would be great. But I would also like for you to win the lottery. We need some financial help. Okay. Would you rather people admire your success or people trust your character? How many people admire your success? What I figured, trust your character? Okay, all right, so I get you, I get you. Okay, this next one is going to be interesting. Would you rather have 10,000 followers online or have 5 people who would carry your casket? 10,000 followers online? One honest person in the room, that's good. 5 people who would carry your casket? That's because Jason's probably thinking he's going to be cremated, so he doesn't need anybody to carry his casket. I heard about this one guy who was planning on being cremated. He said he was going to swallow a bunch of unpopped popcorn kernels before that and to see what that experience might be like for everybody. But, okay. Would you rather avoid thinking about death or live in a way that you're ready for eternity? Now, I'm hoping I kind of know the answer. How many want to avoid thinking about death? Live in a way that you're ready for eternity? Okay, that's probably why you're here. That's probably why you're here. Okay, last one, not a trick question, but be honest. Would you rather go to a wedding or go to a funeral? How many would rather go to a wedding? How many would rather go to a funeral? Okay, good. We'll come back to that because according to what we're going to look at today, the funeral might help you more. Heard about the guy who invented throat lozenges, passed away. Sadly, there was no coffin at the funeral. Okay, I've got some others, but I won't get into it. You can talk to me after church for some more insider jokes there. But look, we all work hard every day for a better life. We want a better life. We want to live better. We want to do better. We want to be better. But can I just tell you that a life that ignores death often wastes energy on what won't matter tomorrow. Our own mortality isn't meant to scare us. It's meant to teach us what to live for. When life hands us choices, we need to decide better. Thus, our series that we're calling Better, where we are trying to do better, be better, live better. But we're looking at passages from the scripture that actually use the word better in them. To date, we've looked at 4. Today, I'll add number 5, and next week we'll finish this off with the 6th one. But here's where we've been at so far. And as these come up on the screen, we're going to say them together, all right? Psalm 84:10. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. That was week 1. Week 2 was Ecclesiastes 4:6. Better to have one handful with quietness. Okay, so we're going to say these together. I mean, you're not even doing them from memory. You're reading the screen. So here we go. Better to have one handful with quietness than 2 handfuls with hard work and chasing the wind. Week 3 was Proverbs 16:16. Let's say it together. How much better to get wisdom than gold and good judgment than silver. Last week, talking about integrity, we looked at Proverbs 19:1. Better to be poor and honest than to be dishonest and a fool. Here's today's verse from Ecclesiastes 7:2. I'm not trying to be morbid about this, not trying to be depressing as it's going to sound at first, but here's what the scripture says. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. Let's say that together. Better to spend time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. You don't hear those words very often. Look, funerals haven't been my favorite places either. Maybe the same is true for you. Maybe you're not a morning person, but that's just sort of the way it is. But seriously, funerals are associated with raw grief, and that can be painful at times to watch people with their raw grief. Funerals have this somber mood. There are hushed whispers. There's a heavy air that accompanies these events. But parties, on the other hand, yes, bring them on, especially if there's cake, ice cream, and a taco guy. Bring them on. But yet our passage for this week suggests that the reason I dislike funerals is the reason I need them. The reason you dislike funerals is the reason you need them. No one has ever said, hey, what are you doing Friday night? Oh, I'm hoping to attend a quality funeral. It's life-changing. Nobody ever says that. Nobody ever leaves a party thinking, man, that was life-changing. But people do leave funerals thinking, wow, I need to get my life in order. You see, funerals have a way of bringing a dose of reality to us. They make us realize that we not are only missing the person who has died, but that our own days are numbered too. We are mortals with a limited amount of time. In other words, we're all going to die, so it's good to think about that while there's still time to think about that. This isn't Solomon poo-pooing on parties and having fun. He's not saying that the party that maybe you're going to this afternoon is sinful. He's not saying that at all. Nothing wrong with parties, at least most of them. Parties can often be an escape from certain realities, and that's not always bad. But what he's trying to say is that funerals teach what parties can't. There's something more you gain at a funeral than you do at a party. A party says, enjoy the moment, but a funeral says, evaluate your life. A traditional grave epitaph that was popular on headstones, particularly in New England and Great Britain from the 17th through the 19th centuries, went something like this. Stop, my friend, as you pass by. As you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you shall be. Prepare yourself to follow me. Lots of people would put that on their tombstone. And then people started adding a little bit more to that. And they would sometimes scratch this into the tombstone, kind of as a somber warning, if you will. It became sort of a philosophical joke that said, to follow you, I'm not content until I know which way you went. We are all going to take our last breath one day. What are we doing to prepare for that? I know that sounds morbid. I know people don't like to talk about this. People don't like to talk about their arrangements and what they need, what they want should they pass away. But I think it's a good idea so that your family knows what it is that you actually want. And then they can choose to decide whether they're going to honor your wishes or not, to which there's really nothing you can do, but I told you last week that all my family are rednecks. My parents were born and raised in West Virginia, as were pretty much all my family. And the tradition there was that, the family would all be buried in this same cemetery. So my mother's father, my mother's mother, my mother's sister, my mother's brother, and a whole bunch of other family members were buried in this particular cemetery. And my mother would say to my dad, I want us to be buried there too. And so my dad made all these arrangements to be buried in this cemetery, prepaid for everything. He would say, all you need to do is pick out an outfit for me. And I would come back at him and going, but Dad, you're an Army veteran. You can be buried for free in a military cemetery like Riverside National. When you're gone and you can't do anything about it, I'm going to get a refund from that cemetery and bury you over here for it's free, and then I'm going to pocket the money. Now, I didn't do that, but at least they thought through what arrangements they wanted, what they wanted done for themselves, and we honored their wishes, and they're buried in this cemetery. At least they thought about down the road what we want to happen in the event that we pass away. They thought through what we would want to happen if we become in such a state that we can't make decisions for ourselves. So they thought about that, and I thought those are good things. But this passage from Ecclesiastes 7:2 just seems absolutely bizarre, because most of us would probably rather go to a wedding, a party, than to go to a funeral. But Solomon, this person of great wisdom, says we ought to consider going to funerals more so than we consider going to parties. And I think what he's really trying to say in Ecclesiastes 7:2 is, number one, that funerals wake us up to reality. Mortality is undeniable. I don't care how many vegetables you eat, which I think is a good thing. I don't care how much you exercise every day. I don't care, how good you take care of your own physical body. One day it is going to give out. Mortality is undeniable. Now, that's not a reason to say, screw that, I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't think that's a good way to proceed. But anyway, so mortality is undeniable. Life is short. We're not in control. We cannot stop death. Death is the destiny of everyone. The passage says, after all, everyone dies. But most of us in everyday life live as though we act like we're going to live forever. We assume there will always be time to fix mistakes, reconcile relationships, to pursue our purpose. We spend our time scrolling on social media, binge watching Netflix, working nonstop, playing hard. But then we go to a funeral, and that illusion that we had of life is shattered. Seeing a casket, a grieving family, an empty seat reminds us that could be me. Funerals have a way of slowing us down and forcing the big questions. What really matters? What am I doing with my life? What will people say about me when I'm gone? Did I live well? Did I love well? If today was my last day, would I be ready for what comes next? You never leave a party thinking, you know what, I need to forgive my brother. Man, I really need to be a better parent. I better get my life right with God. But when people leave funerals, they think about those things all the time, because funerals interrupt the illusions that we have forever. When you realize that life is short, grudges seem small, pride looks foolish, time becomes valuable, and relationships matter more. When you remember that life is short, you stop living like you have forever, and you start living like today actually counts. As a pastor, I've officiated my fair share of funerals. And over the years, I've done a lot of services where the deceased, I think, had truly thought about how short life was. I think they had realized their own mortality, and they were planning for what was to come next. But I've done some where that isn't the case, and one in particular that I remember, and I didn't know these people. I was doing a service for a funeral home, and I phoned the family. It was the son, it was the father who had passed away, and I phoned the son. I got his wife, so this was the daughter-in-law. And she said, I'm kind of handling everything because this is rough for the family. I said, okay, I get it. And she said, but before you say anything else, I want you to know this. We do not want you to say anything about our father or father-in-law. There was absolutely nothing good in his life. He was a horrible person. He was a horrible father. The only thing that was good about him is he was in the United States Air Force, thus the reason he's being buried at Riverside National. I thought to myself, man, that's sad. And then I thought, well, what am I going to say? How do you lead a service that you can't really say anything about the deceased? Funerals. Funerals wake us up to reality. Number 2, funerals correct our priorities. At a funeral, nobody talks about trivial things like their likes on social media, their square footage, their truck rims, or their fantasy football championship. Nobody at a funeral ever says, well, what we're really going to miss is how clean he kept his garage. Or, man, she had more likes online than anyone I know. But what you do here are things that actually matter. He truly loved people. She was faithful. Man, they walked with God. People at funerals usually talk about things like love and character, faith, kindness, impact. And when Solomon gives us this in Ecclesiastes 7:2, he's speaking about 2 things. Number 1, reflection leads to wisdom. And number 2, when death is in view, clarity comes into focus. I think that's his kind of objective. The psalmist wrote this in Psalm 90, verse 12, where it says, teach us to number our days and recognize how few they are. Help us to spend them as we should. You don't get wisdom by pretending that life is endless. You get wisdom when you realize that life is limited. Number 3, funerals soften hard hearts. Parties, life's fun moments, they make us loud and proud, but funerals, life's hardships and losses, they sort of make us slow down. They make us more reflective. They make us more tender. And so that's why Solomon would say, the living should take this to heart. We often meet God more clearly in grief than in comfort. That's probably something that applies across the board, because when I think about like the prodigal son, he came home when life got hard. The thief on the cross that turned to Jesus did so when he himself was facing death. Pain has a way of clearing spiritual fog. Number 4, funerals inspire intentional living. Every life is a story, including yours. But every story will end in death. Funerals then reveal what that story emphasized. That's what people talk about at funerals. Did the person love? Did the person forgive? Did the person trust God? Did they make decisions that matter for eternity? Funerals ask implicitly, how will my story end? What will my legacy be? So before we get to your funeral, ask yourself questions like this. Am I living distracted or intentional? What legacy am I writing? How will I be remembered? What story am I telling with my life? What would people say about my life right now? If my life ended this week, would I be ready? Am I investing in what will matter when I stand before God? It is likely that the day will come where people will stand up and speak at your funeral. What kind of story do you want them to tell about you? Because the good news is that you and I still have time to write the story that we want. I don't care what you've done in the past, from this moment forward, you can begin to rewrite the story of your life that you would be proud for someone to tell. So thus, Solomon gives us this truth and saying the wise person doesn't avoid this thought that we're going to someday die. The wise person actually leans into it, because it's when you face death honestly that you can start living intentionally. So if that's the case, let there be no more delaying. Let there be no more procrastinating for you on matters like repentance or forgiveness or reconciliation. Waiting to love, waiting to forgive, waiting to serve later is risky, because life could end for you before you get the chance. Number 5, funerals force the eternal question. Every funeral asks a question no one can avoid. What happens after this? You can avoid that question at a party, but you cannot avoid that question while standing in front of a casket. It's the eternal question. Am I going to be in heaven with God, or am I going to be separated from God in hell? And you can only answer that question while you're still living. You can't answer that after you have passed from this life. So it is best to face spiritual truths now. The Bible's very clear that life is temporary, eternity is real, but Jesus came to deal with death. So what do we do with that? Solomon wasn't being dark and morbid. He's being merciful when he gives us this in Ecclesiastes 7:2. And so don't wait until it's too late to think about what matters most. Don't wait until it's too late to address eternal questions about life and the afterlife. Number 6, funerals should be a party if we live the way we should. Thus, the people say we need to bring fun back to funerals. I know this all sounds crazy to you, but let me explain something. A funeral shouldn't be a party because it's not serious, because death is not serious. It's not a party because people are grieving. It's not a party because people aren't sad. But it should be a party because of the way that person lived. They lived so well. The people just can't mourn their loss. They have to celebrate the impact. They have to celebrate the fact that their loved one is with Jesus. And if heaven's throwing a party, I say, why not us? But this is difficult. My wife's mother passed away February 11th last year, so we're coming up on a 1-year anniversary. Anyone that knows me very well could figure out kind of what was going to happen here, but when you've got a family that, my wife's got a brother, he's a pastor. My wife's got a sister who serves at a church, and her husband is the associate pastor at that church. Cindy and I, both pastors. My father-in-law is a pastor. Now you're sitting in a room filled with pastors, which sounds like there's a joke coming, but there's really not. So my mother-in-law has passed, and family starts planning a memorial service. And my brother-in-law, as the oldest and the son, he's going to be the official officiant, if you will, of the service. But my brother-in-law, Steve, he's going to say some things, and Steve is a very serious guy. And then I was asked if I would share, and I said, absolutely, but I'm going to share the moments that I remember with my mother-in-law. And I said, I'm just giving you fair warning that everything I'm going to share is hilarious. And they said, no, that's what we want because, man, we're here to celebrate, She's with Jesus, and here we are, and we're remembering her 88 years and all. And I said, okay. So I walk up to the stage, and I had my top 10 list. One of the 10 that I shared went something like this. More than 20 years ago, my in-laws came to Southern California to visit. My mother-in-law always loved the beach. And so we decided to go to Newport Beach. She always loved to walk on the beach and look for shells and all of that kind of thing. So my wife and I, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, the four of us go to Newport Beach. And my mother-in-law wanted to walk along the beach. This particular day, the tide was in. And she wasn't a person who was going to go swimming in the ocean. She was a person that liked to walk and, let the water hit her legs and all of that. And so she's walking, but because the tide was in, you didn't have to go too far out before the ocean floor just dropped off. And she was just mindlessly walking around looking and whatever. And the next thing you know, she's totally in. Now, she was a swimmer. She could swim, but you know how it is at the beach. Just one wave comes in after another. It knocks you forward, and then it sucks you out, and it knocks you forward. And Cindy and I and my father-in-law, we're sitting on the beach, and we look over there, and hey, my mother-in-law is struggling. My father-in-law got up as quickly as possible, kind of the John Wayne character person that he is, and he ran over there, and he grabbed her by the shirt and just jerked her out with one hand. That's what actually happened, but this is what I told at the service. Just kitty corner to where my mother-in-law was in the water was a lifeguard stand. And on that lifeguard stand was this shirtless, tan, muscular, completely ripped, six-pack on display, long flowing hair like something you would see in a movie. And I said, I think what was actually happening there is that she was flailing in the water, hoping that the lifeguard would jump off of the stand and come running in slow motion and pull her out and lay her on the beach and give her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But the image that I saw when my father-in-law jerked her out and she opened her eyes was one of sheer disappointment. I told 9 other stories similar to that. No one flinched. No one laughed. No one smiled except for me. And I felt like they must think I am a nutcase. So when it was all over and we go back to the house, I'm like, why didn't you guys laugh? And they go, we were laughing. And I go, I just think that nobody expected to go to a funeral that was going to be fun. We were putting fun back into funeral. And I thought that day to myself, if there's ever a funeral for me and there isn't more laughing than crying, then something badly went wrong. I don't want a bunch of people snotting around about me. I want people telling stories about me, making fun of me, roasting me, laughing about me. That would be the ultimate for me. Somebody said, well, if your funeral is a party, then you either had a lot of great friends or a lot of enemies. I'm hoping for me it would be a lot of great friends. But look, when there's a service for me or a moment of silence or whatever, I will already be with my Lord. And as I read in my one-year Bible reading yesterday from the book of Job, Job 19:17, my breath is repulsive to my wife. That's actually in Job, but that isn't the one I was thinking of. The one I was actually focusing on was just a few verses beneath that. Job 19:26. After My body has decayed, yet in my body I will see God. I will see him for myself. Yes, I will see him with my own eyes. I am overwhelmed at the thought. So don't cry for me, Argentina or Moreno Valley. I was a believer. I was ready to meet my maker. Faith has now become sight. The battle's over. Jesus was waiting. There I am in his arms, and it doesn't get any better than that. Heaven is rejoicing. Death for me is gone. And look, if it's my jokes you'll miss, then just look them up online, because that's what I do. Nothing I say about that is original to me. You can come up with any of those things. I just pulled them off of AI. But here's the good news, that Jesus faced the cross so that death would not have the final word. After raising his good friend Lazarus from the dead, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. One of those eternal questions then is, are you a believer? Because anyone who believes in me, he says, will live even after dying. So here's the good news. If you're a believer, funerals are not final for believers. Graves are just temporary addresses. Death has lost its sting. And the wise people live in light of that today. Death is the teacher that shows us how to truly live. And funerals are a reminder to us that this life is actually just a preparation for the next. And hopefully that reflection will lead each of us to a faith and trust in Jesus. If you've been ignoring God or avoiding serious reflection, I pray that something will be different for you today, and that you will respond to Jesus, that somehow you will connect to the idea of confronting mortality with turning to Christ, and that you will put your trust completely in him. So that when your number is called, we can have a party. See what I mean? You guys are just like the people I was speaking to at my mother-in-law's service. You're in shock about this because you probably never thought about this, or nobody's ever actually told you about this. But here's what Solomon said again. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. Not because grief is fun, but because clarity is priceless. Parties make us forget that life is short. But funerals remind us that life is sacred. And the person who remembers that will live wiser, love deeper, and walk closer to God, no doubt. So again, life is short, death is certain, but God is real, and eternity matters. And the moments in life that make us confront this reality, though uncomfortable, are the ones that teach us how to live wisely. Think of it like this. When you remember you'll die, you'll finally learn how to live. When you remember you'll die, you'll finally learn how to live. Now, if we're going to take Ecclesiastes 7:2 to heart, and we realize that everyone's going to die, and so it ought to affect how we live, if you take to heart that everyone's going to die, let me just say these 8 things that could help us in life today. Number 1, you'll stop assuming you have unlimited time. Stop living like you've got unlimited time. Oh, you know what? I'll get serious about God later. I'll work on my marriage later. I'll serve when life slows down. I'll give more to the church when I get more. I'll chase purpose for my life when things slow down. No. Remembering death says that later is not promised. Later is not promised. So start the conversations you need to have now. Start making life changes now. Start taking the next steps for yourself now. Not someday, and certainly not later. Number 2, If you take this matter seriously, you'll focus on becoming the right person, not just getting the right things. When death becomes real to you, you'll stop asking, what do I want to have? And you'll start asking, who am I becoming? Because at the end of your life, it is your character that matters. It is your faith that matters. It is your love that matters. Your resume won't comfort anyone at your funeral, but your character will. Number 3, you'll clean up what you've left undone. You'll start thinking, man, I don't want to leave messes behind. I don't want to leave unresolved conflict behind. I don't want to carry grudges. I don't want hidden sin in my life. I don't want words to go unsaid. And so you will confess. You will reconcile. You'll get right with God, and you'll repair everything that you can. Number 4, you'll not leave anything important unsaid. And since life is short, be the person who says, I love you now. Be the person who forgives fast and apologizes quickly. Be the person who makes things right. The person who forgave, the person who forgave. Be the person who lives generously. Be the person who walks closely with God. Death ought to be a reminder that this conversation right now might be the last that any of us have. Number 5, you'll spend time on what outlives you. You can't take money, status, or stuff with you. You've never seen a U-Haul trailer hooked to a hearse. But you can invest in people, in faith, in character, and in making an impact. And when you die, when you remember that you're going to die, you'll start asking yourself, will this matter in 10 years? Will this matter in eternity? And if you say no, it loses power over your schedule. So learn to love more, give more, serve more, because eternal matters are far greater than temporary pleasures. Number 6, you'll become more present. Every moment in your life only happens once, and then it is gone forever. You can rewatch a game, you can replay a song, you can revisit a place, but you cannot replay that conversation or that season of life or that stage your kids are in or that chance for you to say something. Once a moment passes, it becomes a memory, not an opportunity. And death makes that reality unavoidable. So look people in the eyes while you can. Listen to them without rushing. Enjoy the small moments of life and stop living half here and half online. Number 7, you'll live ready, not reckless. Remembering that death is coming for all of us should lead us to desire to have a clear conscience, to have a growing faith, to live a life aligned with Jesus. Not fear, but readiness. None of us would ever want to stand before God and say, well, I meant to, I was going to. No, we all want to stand before God and say, I followed you. Number 8, you'll not delay spiritual decisions. We often say, I'll get serious about God someday. I'll deal with that sin later. I'll come back to church when things settle down. I'll surrender my life to God when I'm older. But the most dangerous word spiritually is that word later. And while you are waiting for later, conviction starts to get quieter. Sensitivity decreases. Habits grow stronger and resistance hardens. So today is all we have. This moment is all we have. Today is the day to act. That's why Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 6:2, indeed, the right time is now. He said, today is the day of salvation. He would say today is the day because we don't have a promise of tomorrow. We don't have a promise of this afternoon. We have right now, and that's all we know that we have. And again, when you remember you'll die, you'll finally learn how to live. How are you going to live? Now, like I said, I know you're going to walk out of here and potential is to go, man, that was morbid. I don't like to think about those things. But hopefully I've forced you to at least consider something, because my guess is all of us have been to funerals before. And the funerals we've been to have not all been of people in their late 80s. The saddest funeral I ever officiated was that of a baby whose mother, while on drugs, left her in the tub and she drowned. Before the funeral, mom was incarcerated and dad was there. And to watch him carry that little baby's coffin from the back of that hearse to the grave, and then watching him after the service was over take his shirt off and start shoveling dirt into that hole, reminded me you don't have to be 90 years old. You don't have to be 88 years old to die. You could die as an infant. You could die as a teenager. You could die in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. None of us have a promise of tomorrow. We're not all guaranteed to grow old. So what we do with this now, today, is of utmost importance. Let's pray. Father, I pray that none of us leave here today going, man, that was just gruesome. But I hope we leave here today taking to heart Solomon's wisdom. That once we realize and recognize and acknowledge that we're not going to live on this earth forever, that mortality is limited, then we are moved to make decisions and choices about how we're going to live today and the remaining days that we have. It would cause us to realize, I need to say to that person, I'm sorry, before I can't say that anymore. I need to decide to work on this relationship. I need to decide to be the husband that I should be. I need to decide to be the father that I should be before it's too late. I need to have God at the center of my life. I need Jesus in my life. I need to be prepared for eternity. And with that, I would ask you, are you ready for eternity? If you took your last breath today, what does the future hold for you? Are you 100% certain that if you died right now that you're going to heaven and you're going to be with God there or not? I know you can push back and go, what if there is no such thing as God or heaven? I know if people flippantly say, no, I want to go to hell and be with my friends, we're going to party. I'm telling you, it's not going to be quite like that. You might not think there is a God and a heaven, but I would just push back and say, but what if there is? You know, I've said this about my own life. If I get to the end and realize there wasn't a God and there is no heaven and I die and that's just it, I'm going to be happy with the way I live my life, the way I've treated people. I'm going to be happy with that. No regrets. I don't feel like I've missed out on anything. I'm ready to go right now. If my number's called, I'm good to go. I'm happy, so, hey. And if there is a God and there is a place called heaven, I know that's where I'm going. And I know that's who is going to be the first one that I meet. So ask yourself some eternal questions. What happens if today is your last day? Are you right with God? Are you right with your spouse? Are you right with your kids? Are you right with your friends? Are you carrying grudges that you just need to let go? Are you harboring hard feelings that you just need to shake off and say, life is too short to worry about those things? I want you to reflect on that. We'll just pause here a moment. It's already uncomfortable enough, I'm sure, so why not add another moment to it? Ask yourself, if I knew that I was going to die at 12 noon today, what do I need to do to be ready for that? If you realize that you're not right with God, why don't you get right with him right now? Today is the day of salvation. Just ask God for his forgiveness. And receive what Jesus has done for you, that he died on a cross for you so that you could live. He wants you to be a believer. Are you a believer? I'm not talking about somebody who repeated a prayer. I'm talking about, are you a believer? And then your life backs that up. Are you a believer? Because Jesus' promise is that you will live even after you die. So get right with God. If you realize there's a conversation you need to have with someone in the car on the way home from church today, then ask God right now to give you the strength to do that. If there's somebody you need to call, if there's somebody you need to go visit, ask God for the strength to do that. If you're carrying hard feelings, you're carrying grudges, ask God to release you of those things. If you've screwed your entire life up to this moment, you've got this moment to begin rewriting your story. I say this at pretty much every service that I do. On the little pamphlet that people get for the service, or what's oftentimes on the screen, or what's etched into a tombstone, is the date of somebody's birth and the date they passed, and then there's just a little dash in between. And that little dash represents all of their life. For my mother-in-law, that little dash represents all 88 plus years that she lived. You're still writing your dash. And at least for this moment, you have the ability to rewrite your story and get it pointed in the direction that you want it to go. We ask for your strength. We ask for your help, Lord. And we thank you for this truth, even though it's hard to swallow, may not become our life verse, but it is true. And I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. I would love to be a fly on the wall when you get in your car. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when you get home or go to work tomorrow and somebody says, so how was church on Sunday? And then for you to hear what you would say, that would be priceless. That would be priceless. I don't think any of us are going to know how to live until we realize that our time here on this earth is limited. And so we make the most of what time we do have. And just trust God with the rest. So I promise you next week, the last better passage that I'll introduce to you will be a lot lighter than this one today, let's just say. But, the others have been pretty good. This one, it's kind of because nobody likes to talk about death, but I think it's a good thing. Anyway, before you go today, I really want to encourage you to think about how you might give to Movement Church. There's so much blessing attached to giving. And sometimes when we're just stingy with the money that God has given us in the first place, we rob ourselves of blessings. I think in the end, we're going to look back and God's going to say, man, I had so many blessings for you, but you were a cheapskate. So let God direct you about your giving. And I know we don't pass the plates or bags or whatever, and so sometimes you don't think about it, but many people are set up on a recurring giving, and I want to encourage you to be a recurring giver. If that works for you, you can set that up on the app, or you can set it up through your local bank's bill pay like I do. And it takes money to make the church go forward, and we could use your help. So think about that today. If you want to give a check or cash, there's boxes in the back. You can just drop that in those envelopes, put an envelope, drop it in that box. And then finally, if you would like to pray with somebody before you go, all three people that are going to be up here to pray for you are bilingual. So if you prefer to pray in Spanish, they'll pray in Spanish with you. You don't get that in the second service, but you're going to get that today in this service. So Tito, Carol, and Jerry would be more than happy to pray for you in Spanish if that works for you. But don't leave today carrying something that you could have passed off to God. Let them pray for you. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful afternoon. Meet somebody new that you don't know, and then bring somebody with you next week.